Good morning to all of you. We're going to continue with the findings, with the results, with some of the challenges that you can see here, Yvonne, and along with Elizabeth. So we're going to look a little bit more closely at what it is to improve the results of the costing and some recommendations that our colleagues are going to give us. Yvonne? Hello. Good morning, almost afternoon to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to, this is going to be a joint presentation. It's going to be oriented, as Andreas mentioning, in the issue of recommendations. I'm going to be the first part of the presentation, and Elizabeth is going to, it's a process that it's going to be moving the two regional offices of NGO Women and PNUD in Latin America and the Caribbean. So before beginning with the presentation itself, I would like to show you a video that is very brief, that is very short, so that we can begin. While they get the video going, I just wanted to comment to you that I just wanted to comment that the reason for which I have shown up a number of times here in this program is that I am substituting a colleague that was not able to come, unfortunately, and one of the people that I think, along with Tanya and some of the other people that are here and that know a great deal about budgeting with gender focus, that Lorena Barba, that if you're going to see us. And in the previous panel, in my former life as a consultant, which was last year, I was doing this kind of work for UN Women in Pacific Asia, and now I have my current hat on, is the issue of regional advisor. To say something. We had the video, otherwise we can see it at the end. We can see it at the end. It's happening. Going once, twice, okay. We don't have internet, so if you can see it in the end, it's up on the website of the seminar where we're gathering all the materials. And if we can finally have not been able to see. As I commented recently, what we want to share with you has to do with a process of administration of knowledge from the regional offices of these two agencies, from PNUD and UN Women, in order to be able to attempt to systematize and to raise the knowledge that is in the region of costing experiences and budget that is gender sensitive. All of this knowledge that is in the countries that have developed different countries, we have began this year a process that has had three stages. That has identification, elaborating an extensive map of costing experiences of policies of equality and policies of that contribute to gender equality in the region. We have attempted as well to develop and elaborate a more conceptual document to focus more in the methodological approximation exercises that the different experiences have been assumed and implemented in the region in order to be able to also have this view, and with this base be able to generate an exchange space of experience and knowledge that is more presence-based than could perhaps articulate better all of these knowledges. So this process has attempted, on the one hand, to identify the how it was done, but also attempt to find a certain steps or strategies to define how to be able to do it. And that is to say, to be able to see how these costing exercises can be carried out in the understanding that there's not a unique recipe and that it's not about copying what other countries have done, but rather to see what works and we can be adapting. Within this, in this last stage that I mentioned of exchange of knowledge, concretely, we carried out a workshop, an exchange workshop in June of this year, a very short time ago in Panama, in which we had the participation of 8 countries in the region. Many of these experiences are here, and they're part of a continuity process, and this seminar is also of this work. We participated in this work, Bolivia, Uruguay and Honduras, but also experiences from Mexico, El Salvador, Dominican Republic, Colombia, and Ecuador, and Panama. The objectives of this workshop were the costing policies. They had, on the one hand, the idea of identifying which were the experiences that were remarkable for this methodologies that had been utilized, but also to be able to elaborate certain recommendations and conclusions that could perhaps work to potentiate the costing exercises in the region and to generate changes and transformations that would be more in depth than would have been able to do up until this day. So, as a result of this whole process of systematization and exchange of knowledge and information, we have developed a document of recommendations which identifies, on the one hand, where are the principal bottlenecks, the critical knots related to the costing exercises of policies that promote gender equality, but also a number of recommendations that allow us to be able to put a leap forward in this regard. So in that regard, the document is also available in Spanish and in English, and the organizers also have it so it can be shared with all of you. So what we would like to share is, as I said, a brief synthesis of some of these main challenges that I'm going to put in the challenges, and Elizabeth is going to explain a little bit more about what would be the possible recommendations that could be built based on the experiences that we have in the region. We have organized the challenges in 5 dimensions, which have to do with political aspect, with the technical. We've also been talking about, and in the consideration of this exercise as something that has to do with these 2 dimensions, but also challenges that have to do with the institutional, certain others with the issue of data and information, and specific challenges that have to do with financing and budgeting. Obviously, some of these challenges answer to more than one dimension. This is a way of organizing this. What has come out as a part of this exchange. And many of these challenges have multiple dimensions, and it's also important that the way they're approached is done in a more integrated manner, that they can be put forth in an integrated manner. And going a little bit more into the political dimension, one of the issues that was clearly identified, and that perhaps beginning with the political aspect, a great number of the challenges that we have identified in the region have coincided with that have been discussed during these last 2.5 days of work in this seminar. There's many common points with the challenges that are being identified from other regions of the country. What I don't know if it's good or bad. It seems that the bottlenecks The rough bottlenecks are pretty much everywhere. The critical knots are everywhere, but it serves us to have that sort of an overview as to how the obstacles that Latin America is facing in this regard of designing and being able to carry out these kind of exercises is also being confronted in other countries, and therefore we can also think about solutions and in answers that can provide us answers, give us all with answers. As I mentioned, with the political dimension, clear that it's necessary to have a reference, a framework, a political framework of gender equality. That is to say, a plan or a national equality strategy, because otherwise we run the risk of not implementing fragmented interventions or that do not answer effectively to the priorities that have been established in the equality agenda. And this is a problem that was put forth, and many countries do not have this kind of framework that can provide some sort of a guidance in this regard. On the other hand, we have an important challenge, the need of more political will, more political commitment to the highest level, and especially with the ministries of economy and finance, to be able to institutionalize the budgeting exercises of gender equality, and also to be able to incorporate the interventions that have been costed out as part of the planning and the budgeting of the sectorial. We still have a lot of resistance in certain institutions in order to be able to understand the importance of these type of exercises, but also to be able to add on to, and that's where the greatest challenge would be, that the gender equality is a priority for the development models for the countries. And also it has been put forth that in order to be able to guarantee the sustainability of the processes that go beyond the changes of government and the political wills for the moment. And we're putting forth the need to be able to assure that sustainability in order to be able to articulate alliances, key alliances between that could perhaps guarantee that these processes have a continuity, thus making the institutionalization of the budget exercises and the costing exercises also is put forth as an answer to this challenge. And also the need to ensure the participation sustainable of the women's organizations and feminists in these processes, not only in order to promote on the costing exercise, but also the different phases of these stages, and primarily what has to do with the use of the results of these exercises. And it's something that not in all countries in the region is being given with a lot of clarity or strength, this articulation with the movement of women and movements. In regards to the dimension, institutional dimension, it was put forth as an enormous challenge, the weaknesses, institutional weaknesses of the equality mechanisms, weaknesses that have to do with the level of hierarchy that is occupied by these mechanisms in the state itself, with a lack of personnel in some cases, with the very little budget that is assigned and compared to the global budgets, and the need to provide a greater synergy and coordination between the mechanism for equality and the sectorial institutions which are responsible for intervention that are being costed out. There's a great challenge that some institutions will not be able to assume the responsibilities of implementing these type of policies. We continue believing that in some cases the mechanism of equality is the one that is responsible for its execution. We don't handle the directorship. And in these mechanisms, we continue to have a lack of coordination, interinstitutional coordination. And we put forth also as a very common challenge the limitation of capacities, institutional capacities, and human resources in gender, and the application of this knowledge in planning and costing. To this we add the fact that there's a great rotation of staff in the institutions that is in charge of these processes, and therefore we had less staff that it would be trained in gender equality, but also the knowledge to be able to apply these in the budgeting. But not only that, but also we had systems that would ensure that the capacities can stay within the institutions above and beyond the capacity, the training of personnel, particularly at this high level of rotation that we have in the institutions. And we also have as an important challenge the issue of decentralization and territoriality, which is an ongoing process, an ongoing concern in many countries due to the issue of the arrival of the centralized institutions to the which is still a challenge, and the fact that not all of the institutions have the attributions or the competencies necessary in order to be able to promote equitable policies, to be able to operate. They're destined to the same, and therefore it makes it difficult. It makes difficult the exercises of costing. And also there's the issue of limitations in the process of planning and budgeting to take into consideration the problems that there is in to see the results, to contribute to the reduction of that inequality, incorporating the results into the plans and to the programs. As far as the dimension, an important challenge has been put forth of this articulation between the tools that are being used for costing and the planning and the budgeting. That is to say, on the one hand, that the tools, the methodological tools of the costing, in some cases are not aligned to the planning processes and budgeting of the states. And on the other hand, these planning instruments and budgeting instruments of the institutions many times do not allow us to degregate the established by sex and specific gender. So there's we have an overlap that is, and it was also placed as a challenge that the tools themselves for the costing things, the methodological of the costing tools is still a price that is in the process of construction, and that has a certain complexity in terms of its application and interventions that are multi-sectorial, and therefore this continues to be a challenge. And also it's a question that is very important, which is in the seminar which you mentioned a number of times, which has to do with the challenge of being able to understand these kind of exercises as something that is merely something technical. That is to say, that after a given time it becomes technocratic, and the political dimension that has to do with gender disequality, and to be able to really raise the issue in the system, it just becomes plays a secondary role, just kind of evaporates, and that is diluted in the technical aspect. So this was also put forward as a challenge to be faced and addressed. In the fourth dimension that we have identified, which we had to do with the information, we had the issue of the absence of information, updated information that supports the decision making in the designing phases of the costing, but not only of desegregated data by gender, but also of information that truly feeds a little bit more what are the structural problems of gender inequality that the countries are facing. So it goes beyond the statistics that have to do a little bit more with the analysis of this data, which would help to make information that can provide better decision making. On the other hand, we put forth a limitation to the availability of data and or the information systems with adequate indicators that would provide an account of the different sectors, and there's difficulties in certain countries so that the statistics will take into consideration the gender differences in the instrument that they use, in the surveys that they apply, in the census, etc. And in some countries where we're implementing information systems that are multi-sectorial with desegregated data, there's also a challenge that has to do with the technical complexity. Technical on the one hand because it requires time in order to be able to modify technologically how it is that the information is gathered in these systems, but also time in order to be able to so the people from the institutions can be done with these new instruments and these tools that provide data that is more adequate for the development of the policies. And last but not least, as far as the financial dimensions, we put forth also an absence of information that is available regarding the public resources that are designated to gender equality. So it's still difficult to know in some countries how much has been assigned to this issue, and many of the resources are not ticketed, they're not explicitly explained. And so the absence of specific resources and multi-sectorial to be able to comply with equality, that we hope that to gender equality, and the implementation of many of these legislations and policies require budgets, and a number of requires the assignation of budgets, resources in many institutional. And so it also puts forth as a challenge in this dimension the absence of specific mechanisms that ensure the financing of gender equality, that is to say, to ensure financial sources that are reliable, because we have also been speaking about the seminar that was carried out in Panama, and in this talking a great deal about the issue of fiscal and fiscal and taxing structures that they can in some way ensure specific sources of resources. So this is like a synthesis, a general synthesis of some of the challenges, as I said, that have been put forth from the position of experiences in the region. And I would like to give Elizabeth the floor so she can share with you some of the recommendations that have been identified also to be able to be moving forward in this regard. Thank you, Yvonne. Very well. As you will be able to see, in many senses, the conclusions that we have reached are very similar. Thank you. They're very similar to the ones that are have been seen as general conclusions in the use of the costing exercises. First of all, it would be to say that okay. So these recommendations are like, why do we want to use this exercises? Well, what is the purpose? And in the first place, as we have shown in the previous slide that everyone showed, they can be used to reach a greater generation of resources in order to finance the social policies and political that can contribute to gender equality, that is to say, to improve the fiscal space. And that is to say, many times, and I think Tanya was mentioning it, that in the exercise in Bolivia, not only did they take a look around at the budget, but also they were like seeing how they could also improve some of the parts or where to get the money from. So this issue of the greater resources, or to improve that gathering, but also to improve the policy, the politics that is already being financed. Another one would be the redistribution, the fiscal policy. In the third place, I'd also have to be able to reach a greater assignation of resources to the plans and programs and intervention that are specific, that will contribute to the gender equality. And of course, the last one, which has to do with some of the challenges that Yvonne pointed out, is to improve the public administration, which is not necessarily, has nothing to do with gender equality. But if you would definitely improve the specific programs for equality, for gender equality. I'm going to go one at a time. So here in the first place, to be able to reach a greater collection, a greater fund of takings, the public resource once again in some of the countries, not only Latin America, but also talking with some of our colleagues, it seems that in Africa and in Asia, the countries are gambling, are betting on, it's like a kind of a second part of the extraction-based industries. So for some of the new products that are in the market, so this whole thing of the strange land, the components that go towards our telephones and electronic instruments that we use, all that has opened once again the whole issue of the extraction industry. And we're not even going to mention oil here, but these financing sources that the governments are using are very important, but they're also to see the impact that it also has on inequality, particularly in the area of rural women and indigenous women. Also to improve the efficiency of and many times in the seminar we have spoken about how exceptions are made, even though there's a separate point for this, but also to improve everything that has to do with the collection of taxes, and that is to say, to pass a little bit more from the indirect to the more direct ones. And also, evidently, to be able to improve the transparency over fiscalization, because many times we don't know in the countries. It's a very important piece of data to be able to make a micro-simulation, which is an area that the PNUD is now going into, which we really certainly have to go into the issue of gender equality. We have to go in and see which are the effective rates of the collection rates. That is to say, we have a rate of 40%. So for the highest income, but once we take into consideration all the exonerations, as it turns out, it's a much higher, it's a much lower rate. So we have to improve that efficiency, and we also have to review those exonerations and reductions. And in the issue of transparency, we need to be able to have access to those data. That is to say, once we effectively have done all of the exonerations, what is the effective rate? Because that is very important in order to be able to make some sort of an analysis, a more refined analysis, as to how this affects change in the policy different on the different levels of income. For people in the second place, to improve the redistribution and the impact of the fiscal policy. Also in this seminar we have seen, like many times, that there are problems in gender, and there's regressive of the taxes. I hope that this can be a good sign that that maybe perhaps they're gonna get a lot of money for gender equality. So these reduction or suspension of funds, like I said many times, like I said previously 2 days ago, it's very important that we move forward from looking into only the expenses, but also look into the taxes and how does that affect the men and women that in a different manner, and also evidently if these attributes are regressive, but to review that redistributive of the benefits and subsidies. This is very important because in the OECD countries, as well as the redistribution can change the inequality up to 20 points. While in Latin America, for example, it only changes to 2 or 3. So the redistribution has to do also with to make the system, the fiscal system more efficient. So this is a very important issue. That is to say, how are the expenses and the taxes and the subsidies, are they really redistributing wealth between all of the population? And evidently also we have to put attention or pay attention to the analysis of the pre-assigned that is established, and also to try to promote that redistribution towards more equanimous use of the resources. So what I mean by this, that sometimes we know what we're already going to do with the money. So when we do the fiscal planning and we do the development, we see this money is marked off for this situation. And here what we're talking about is to be able to think if this is really going to contribute or is going to make the situation, gender situation better or worse. The third point, which is to greater assignment of resources towards plans, policies that specifically contribute to gender equality. Well, we have evidently, and Yvonne already mentioned, to place the issue of gender equality as part of the political agenda. That is to say, to know the cost, to know how much of this cost is going to be necessary, but also to know we're going to have that debate because evidently to highlight that this is about an issue of rights and that the government has an obligation in this regard. And second thing would be to be able to see the multidimensional character of gender inequality and the need to collaborate. The different sectors would have to collaborate, the different ministries, in order to be able to confront, create impacts. Some people were asking me during the break. I was asked regarding the medium, what would be the difference? That is why we're asking specifically for equality and the costing. What does this have to do? The costing is that the governments have costing. That is to say, it's not that the governments don't do costing. The governments, when they go and do a bridge, they're going to say, okay, we're going to do what they know what the bridge is going to cost, and they take a public tender and they choose the best offer, the best option, and so they know how much it's going to cost. So taking it to a public, it really saves them the heartache and the headache and to kill themselves. So they just take the best offer and they say, okay, well, here we are, we're going to make this bridge with this money. But in governments, for example, in order to be able to plan education and all of these things, they, of course, they have to have a costing factor. They need to know how much they're going to spend in beds and in building the schools, how much are they going to pay the issue is that effectively the lack of gender equality is something that needs to be have dimensions. It's very complicated to make it land. It's very difficult to make the Ministry of Finance understand, because evidently we get how much I have to spend. Well, in all of the ministries you have to spend in order to be able to reach that equality, because practically we can find that in all the sectors, if we take them sectorially, there are. And that also is what makes it more complex, both technically as well as politically, because evidently many of the people that have been sitting in front of ministry, sometimes they believe, where do I begin? And also there's the need on behalf of, on our behalf, for those of us who are in looking for gender equality, to be able to have prioritize, because that is just the nature of the beast. And another thing regarding being able to have the greater assignment of resources, and also to evidence that the financing is insufficient for the legislation. We have seen in the case of the violence against women that it's very, very clear that the money is very little, and when it's available, it's badly used or it doesn't get there. So this is very important to have an evidence that is not sufficient to implement the law. And then also to make it viable, the implementation of policies through incorporating the planning. And this, I think, is really, this factor is, fourth point is really the main part of this section that we have seen has been done. In all of the examples of, regardless of the methodology, of make it viable to see the planification. We thought it's a very interesting case of Kyrgyzstan, the case of Bolivia. That is all of these cases which we saw, costing exercise that we saw from gender costing. It's really this fourth point. That is to say, we're being able to see the implementation of the policies within everything that has to do with the planning of the government, the financial and human development planning. And evidently, the last point which is also important and is also a call of attention to the donors that have to also analyze what other sources are being used and how they're being used. And then there's always a tendency we have to see that effectively financing can arrive from abroad, but what cannot happen is that we're financing all of the gender agencies with only foreign financing. That is to say, the government has to also take charge of its own commitments. And last but not least, which also Yvonne mentioned, that from the problems that the mechanisms that the women have, the institutes or ministries, and the departments, is that to improve public management as a whole. And this is something that is very important because evidently we have to improve the quality of services and the programs and the efficiency of public spending, which many times is not only a problem of a gender problem of programs for women, but also in general there are governments that have many problems in order to be able to get to execute the expenses and to implement the policies. And the second point would be to be able to improve and quantify the planning process. I would say from the instances and the planning systems for budget. So I would also say that this is another challenge which has to do with the issues of equality and rights of women, but it's very general. Evidently, to expand the capacities of the public servants, and here we also hear the same. Everybody hears this crybaby. Yes, but the elections are coming, and they're going to change all of the people in the government are going to start from scratch. It seems like this is a never-ending story, and there's going to come a point where we have trained everybody because there's just not going to be anybody left to train. To train. I don't know when we're going to get there, but this is a point that's a very important point to be able to. Many times it's to begin again, to train. Many times to be able to provide the capacities. It's like a never-ending story. Strategies in order to be able to introduce into the curriculums of public schools, of public administration schools, the issue that they do have in certain countries. It would be a strategy to be able to end with this. But this expansion of capacities is something that's like something that we always need to continue doing. To establish a mechanism of equality and its functions, and as I mentioned, Yvonne mentioned, to have it at a level that can be equal to any other ministry. Because if we have a women's institute that is as an institute and is given a sort of a budget and does certain things, but if they don't sit down on the table in the ministry council, and then they're really going to have a much lower impact than if that was simply as a State Department. It doesn't have too much staff, and also if it doesn't have an answer in capacity to what the government at some point in time can also request. And last but not least, of course, is to improve the information systems and to facilitate the accountability of being able to render the expenses. To do with, in order to improve women, the gender equality, it also requires, we also have to have that same transparency and that rendition of expenditures or accounts. It has to be part of our argument. And with that, I would conclude. I don't know if you would have anything else. I guess it's a wrap. Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Yvonne. We're going to go see the video now. We're going to take a look at the video, and then we'll continue with the complementary phase of certain things that have not been left clear. Let's go with the video, please. We have to convince the governments that investing in gender equality is a win-all for the society. And these costing exercises also linked to programming can also show through the evaluation of their impact of the benefits at the end of the quality of the policies. Gender equality in the end, it's an investment. And in order to have it clear, this issue that it's an investment, we need precisely financial elements. That is to say, why is it an investment? If for every that you spend, how much is this going to generate in the society? Costing allows you to see what you need to do, and you compare it with what is being done, and the gaps are truly very large. So being aware that the resources are scarce, we also know that in fiscal policy, one of the fundamental elements is a priority and the redistribution. And the resources are few, but the resource exists for other types of things that are not as prioritized. I think that the main challenge has to do with the gender inequality has many causes, and thus in order to be able to cost out these kind of policies, you have to look at many sectors and many interventions that are located in policies in different things, to see what kind of methodology exists to be able to do the costing exercises, and then it's political because we need to see the kind of work, to be able to have adequate information, timely information that is pertinent and efficient. The second is to have a planning system. In the Mexican case, which is a results-based budgeting, we believe that the will of the high authorities, it's voluntary to contribute in this regard. As far as strategies, I think it's an issue of articulating the planning ministry in the sense of work on the information processes of a country, about the statistics of a country, to be able to work a great deal more in regards to the benefits that it have to develop a plan and to be identifying who and for what and what it is that they're going to be able to attain. We have to look for alliances, strategic alliances with governments, with public funded that have they can make positions, but primarily to have a social process of the women that can provide a lot of the costing. How can we make that costing? How can we implement the tools that can be discussed here in the course in order to be able to present a detailed account as to where it is that we want to go and obtaining those objectives? So particularly, I leave with a toolbox that I could implement and improve in my country. I think with the video we close a little bit. What are the findings? What are some of the challenges? I don't know if there's any thing that somebody would like to compliment. In the back, our colleague from Nicaragua, we're going to make about 4 interventions, and then we'll come back with our colleagues. If we can pass the microphone to see, let's see who can collaborate with us. Good morning. It looks like we're coming to a wrap, and particularly we're pretty satisfied with everything that we have shared. And we have to share, we still have to share with you what we are living in our country. I believe that in Nicaragua, women are living a period that is very important, where we are working to have a place in the restitution of our rights as women. Although it's true that in this exercise, this costing exercise, a lot has to do with the context, particular context of each country. There are certain regularities that facilitate this process. And after having heard for 3 days, I listened for a bit to see how it is that we're doing. And I believe that, yes, we do have good conditions to be able to begin this process. The most important thing that we have is the will and the commitment, political commitment, in our country, where we are working this issue with a focus that I have liked that we have managed it in this seminar. And that is to say, gender equality and opportunities between men and women, which is what we are truly making us move forward to the social development. And we have a methodology, a planning methodology that is based on results-based, in which all of the ministries have that methodology, that planning methodology. 8 ministries have made the effort of defining indicators that are disaggregated by gender, and we have made the effort to inform the expenses in a disaggregated manner. Perhaps not with all of the technical amount that we have seen that apply in other countries, but I do believe that we do have some advancements. Recently, and given the importance of this issue for us, we built the ministry, women's ministry, as of this year, as the instance, that is the guiding instance, of the definition and the monitoring of policies that are aimed at promoting the gender equality for women. But even more importantly is that we have a cabinet of women that is presided by our colleague Rosario Murillo, in which we, all of the ministers and all of the congresswomen, all of the secretaries, the joint secretaries of politics, all of the leaders, the youth leaders, the town mayors of all the countries. And this instance meets every week to be evaluating how it is that we're doing and to be reorienting and unifying focus regarding this issue. And we also have law for equal opportunity and the prevention of violence. And we also have our gender policies, which is based basically on the gender equality of rights and opportunities. Amongst the things that I believe that come to mind after having seen so many things that I have learned, and that made me reflect on the fact that we do have the basic tools, the important elements to be able to begin a costing exercise, because I was able to see with certain colleagues, we have a good policy, but we have to really cost it out to be able to see up to what point we can implement it, and to really see if we're going to have as a good intention, but rather as something that is tangible and real. And after having shared with all of you in these days, I do leave, we all leave as a team with a certainty that we can continue moving forward, and that we as UN Women will have to take the next step, technical workshop where we have the adequate tools to begin this costing process. And on our behalf, I would like to thank for this invitation, and to say that we leave very satisfied with all the experiences that we've had. Thank you very much. Any additional interventions? I think everything has been said. Then, in order to conclude with this last panel, which we've been able to conclude very well and to gather the challenges, the encounters and misencounters that the different experiences have shown us. So thank Yvonne and Elizabeth, and just a round of applause. Thank you. Just to recognize the great work that has been carried out by our colleagues that have truly which we have based our intervention. Raquel and Carmen, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And with this panel, we basically have come to the end of all of the work sessions. And in order for the conclusions and recommendations and final recommendations, I would like to invite Mr. Juan Planas, who is the representative from the delegation of the European Union in Bolivia, to Gabriel Machicao from the Ministry of Justice, Amina Anwar, the specialist for the program of UN Women, please, and the Vice Ministry of Autonomy of the Presidencia, Gisela Lopez. I would like to mention that our representative in Bolivia, Soren, of Women in Bolivia, with all of you, she's not going to be able to return from the city of La Paz due to some urgent issues that have to be addressed. Nevertheless, she has been following through internet the presentations, and once again sends her regards and thanks you for that. The whole process will have been contributed to strengthen the knowledge and the actions. And this final part, I would like to beginning in the different countries and back into their original countries to for the importance of these publications. It will be focused primarily in how to influence. That is such a core issue in these issues, particularly in the national levels and global levels, in order to be able to increment the immersion for gender equality and the empowerment of women, which is so important. I'm going to leave the microphones open so that you can organize Juan Planas. Perhaps we could begin with you. I would like to begin by saying that in order to conclude that this activity has been subscribed with a program that is financed by the European Union. It's a program that is called Improving the being able to really supervise gender equality, and for that it is evident that the costing instruments and those experiences that we have lived and what they've shared during these days, the methodology, costing methodology, and the costing methodologies for gender equality is something that is fundamental. I wanted to thank UN Women and also the Bolivian Representative Ministry and Justice for having facilitated this program in Bolivia. A program which Bolivia, in this program, was implemented in 15 countries in 2 categories, and Bolivia has been included, and the inclusion has been recent because Bolivia is an example, and because it's a country that has experience in applying methodologies, costing methodologies for the policies of gender equality. We from the area of cooperation have a number of instruments which we apply not only in Bolivia but also in all of Latin America and in Africa and Asia. As I said at the beginning of this seminar, when we contribute or we try that the gender equality, the gender issues can be included and can be present in all of the programs that we finance, and particularly, and very particularly in the budget support, because the budget support that we provide to the teams so that the government can exercise the policies. They don't take into consideration that a part of that money has to necessarily go to those that established indicators have to go in favor of those policies to favor the situation of women in particular. I'm not going to be able to talk about indicators, but I will talk about, I wanted to say that, highlight something that it has not been sufficiently explicit, that is to say that within this the gender, there are populations that are vulnerable, that are children and elderly people. They're not excluded from gender violence, and that needs to be taken into consideration. I think that the state has a fundamental role and a very important role, and it is from that education that within the schools we have to form the school children so that to include in the curriculums of gender equality, because sometimes members the cultural issues are very difficult to elaborate through education. And I think it's very important. I think that the Islamic government has said everything. And I would only say that to improve the execution of budgets, the budget is not the issue. I mean, you can budget, you can do millions in budget, but equality. But if we don't execute. That's the case in many countries. There's a big difference between the exercise of budgeting exercise and the execution. To say also that the training of public employees is very important, particularly in the case of Bolivia. It's very true there's a high rotation of it's not been the only country, but what's important is that in countries such as Bolivia and others, there's a strategy, as we have here. There's take into consideration these kind of policies, gender policies, and then we'll have the responsible policy, which will be in charge of. And we as donors and the United Nations also as government collaborators will play our role to try to stimulate these public officials so that they can administer these policies correctly. And with this, I think I've extended myself too much. I'd like to thank particularly your presence here, and to thank once again the government of Bolivia and United Nations, the seminar here in Santa Cruz. That has been useful, and I hope that we will be able to establish contacts and that you can continue having experiences in the future. Thank you very much. And the conclusions of Machicado, the representative of the General Ministry of the Plurinational State of Bolivia. Thank you. Ms. Elizabeth Villagomez, representative of the UN for the Caribbean. Juan Planas for the United Nations in Bolivia. The Vice Ministry of Autonomy, Departmental Municipalities. friends and colleagues from Ethiopia, Haiti, Honduras, Jordania, Nicaragua, Spain, Morocco, Uruguay, Argentina, Senegal, and Rwanda, Albania, and Palestine. On behalf of the Ministry of Justice of the Plurinational State of Bolivia, I would like to thank this effort that has allowed us to enrich our experiences in all of the representations that have been present, that strengthen and will continue to strengthen our capacities and visions in gender equality. We hope to have been a host that have fulfilled their. Thank you for your visit, and have a good return to your country. Simplemente quería agradecer a todos
for the valuable contribution that you have brought to this event, for the stimulating discussions that we had over the last 2 days and today. It has been very useful. It's been wonderful discussions. We are aiming to use that knowledge and experiences to enrich our existing knowledge on costing, and to be able the next generation of costing exercises that can actually make use of these experiences and be more refined, using more refined methodologies and all that. So during the last 2 days, what we discussed is how costing is linked to the policy frameworks. We looked at the importance of costing, its linkages with planning and budgeting processes. We also, from the experience of Bolivia, saw that how expanding the fiscal space actually has an effect on, and also increase in economic growth. If right policies are used, how it actually trickles down to impact poor, underprivileged, and also it leads to outcomes which make women better off. We also discussed about different methodologies, and we learned that there's no one fit methodology which suits to all contexts. When methodologies on costing needs to be used, it has to be adapted, and it has to be context specific. We also learned from the experiences of Kyrgyzstan and Honduras that how costing has been instrumental in looking at the financial requirements for a multi-sectoral action plan. And we saw the processes that have been used. We saw what partnerships that have been used, and how the results of costing in those 2 countries have been taken up so that so that they can increase financing for gender equality. I would just wrap up with some of the lessons that we all can take away with us. First of all, I think what we learned from these discussions is why costing has been so important. What is the centrality of costing, especially in the whole planning and budgeting processes? Given that what costing does is that it bridges the gap between what has been budgeted and what is actually required. That leads us to the next important lesson, that we really need to take costing very seriously. We really need to see what are we costing, why are we costing. So these questions that needs to be reflected much before any costing exercise that has taken place. Secondly, what we saw is that costing is not a standalone process. It is part of a bigger process. It's part of the larger planning and budgeting cycle, and it has to be seen as one piece in the larger scheme. Thirdly, as I said earlier, for the methodologies, what we learned is that there's no one-fit methodology. We saw different methodologies that have been discussed here, the unit cost methodology, the impact methodology, and the methodology that is more on GRB. So we really need to see what is more appropriate for the costing that each context needs to aim to conduct. So it's very important to adapt and contextualize these methodologies. Thirdly, I think based on the discussion that, especially in the context of what we saw in case of Kyrgyzstan, it's very important to understand that costing can only take place in a context of a results-based budgeting or programming context. It's very important that the plans or programs that needs to be budgeted have specific results, realistic indicators, and realistic targets. Where we want to go, starting from what, that's very important for us to understand the baselines, the indicators. So any plan, law, program, or any planning sector, whether it's sectoral plan or the national action plan, we really need to bring that down to specific action points that can be quantifiable. Fifth, as we all discussed for the last 3 days, that the centrality of data availability. Without reliable availability of data, it's just simply impossible to cost and to realistically find out what are the financial requirements needed to implement the particular plan or strategy. The sixth lesson that we've learned through this discussion is that the importance of alliances and partnerships. As we know that costing is a very complex process. It requires partnership at different stages and with diverse stakeholders. So we really need to understand that what costing requires is that coordination, it requires information sharing, it involves technical experts, it involves academics, it involves advocacy from the CSOs, it involves willingness from the government authorities, it involves advocacy, and it involves also commitment from the donors. So it's a complex process including everyone. So we really need to understand and make those alliances and partnerships in order for an effective costing exercise. The seventh lesson that we can take away from this discussion is the importance of capacity and technical expertise. During the last 2 days, we saw that lack of expertise, not only on technical side of how to do costing, but lack of expertise within the government authorities and the people who are responsible specifically on gender has been a huge problem. So we really need to make sure that we build the capacity not only for conducting the costing exercise, but enabling the authorities to know what are the gender priorities. From the very beginning, identification of priorities. For a successful costing exercise, you really need to know all these steps. If the authorities identify the right priorities, that will lead to identification of appropriate indicators, the results that you want to achieve. And then also on the technical side, whether you have expertise available in-house for conducting the costing exercise. And when it comes to once the costing exercise is conducted, whether you have technical expertise to analyze the data and whether you have capacities to advocate for using those results. So all these different capacities at different levels, and I think that needs to be taken into account. Finally, and we saw from these experiences as well, any costing exercise that you aim to do also needs to take into account what financial resources that you need to look at. We saw from the experience of Kyrgyzstan that a successful costing exercise has been done for the National Action Plan, but their financial gap that has still need to be filled. There's a 90% financial gap, which they're trying to bridge. So any costing exercise already need to take into account what financial resources that you want to use to implement that particular strategy or plan. So these are some of the lessons that I thought would be valuable for us, but I'm sure that we had a very rich discussion, and there were a lot of many insights and lessons that, and I'm sure we can, probably I have missed a few of them, but I just want to finally thank all of you, especially the Bolivian government, the Ministry of Autonomy, the Ministry of Justice, for hosting this event. I would also like to thank all the government authorities and national representatives who have come all the way from faraway places. So I just really want to thank for their valuable discussion and for their participation. I want to thank the program coordinators for the global program. You're doing an amazing work, and please keep on doing that. I would like to also thank the UN Women Office in Bolivia for hosting this event and making all these arrangements. Thank you so much. And finally, I would like to thank European Commission for their continued support for improving gender equality and for their generous funding for the program. And thanks so much, everyone. And thanks also for the Bogans Villas Hotels for the wonderful facility and hosting us. Thank you so much. Have a safe trip back. Thanks a lot.
And with that, we would like to invite the Vice Ministry of Autonomy from the plurinational state, Ms. Gisela Lopez, who are also going to have her concluding remarks. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. My warm greetings to all the representatives from the institutions and international organizations from the Ministry of Justice that are joining me here at this table. I'd like to be thanked by ONU, UN Women, the Ministry of Justice, the European Commission, which along with the Ministry of Autonomies have this Congress has been made possible of discussion and analysis regarding this very important topic. I bring the appreciation and the thanks from the Ministry, Claudia Peña, the thanks to each and every one of the delegations from the representations of the different countries that have been present in these 3 days in Santa Cruz de la Sierra. And I hope that you have been felt welcome. This is a land of the ministries of source of origin, and this is my land of origin, and it's hospitality. I hope you have felt that warm welcome here in Santa Cruz. I have certain aspects that I would like to share with you. Despite the fact that I was not here for the 3 days with you, in some way I have been able to try to inform through the different colleagues of the Ministry of Autonomies that have been here present. When we began to acknowledge and see and to observe and to work on the different proposals in order to be able to the costing of policies to confront violence towards women in Bolivia, in order to be able to move forward with our legislation, the integrated legislation to assure women a life that is free of violence, in order to be to the different levels of governance that we have in Bolivia would do and budget everything that is required regarding that same legislation. I kind of stayed a little bit concerned because although it's a great utility in order to be able to have instruments that stemmed from this in Bolivia, we didn't, so this legislation would not stay in paper and become just a piece of paper, but rather become a public policy. We thought, in my concern, isn't it a possibility that we're going to fall into the costing of violence towards women? When we look at that focus of assistance towards women that have been victims of violence, and I believe that it's important to have the spaces that you have been able to provide us in the last 3 days of reflection, in the sense that all of the focuses are not only something that remains in the assistance of women that have been victims or have been victims of violence in our society, but rather so this can be complemented with policies that will eradicate and rather to prevent these type of events in our society. In general terms, during these last 3 days, we have been submerged in rich presentations, experiences of your countries regarding a problem that we share. We have made references through you to the costing of rights, practically, to the financial value, to talk about the financial value, to have the people's rights respected, women's rights respected. And therefore we have to have it very clear that this type of costing has to be directed, or it should be directed, to processes of creating awareness, of filing complaints, to be able to really make this a public outcry. Obviously, we also have to make the differentiation that we're talking about budgets and costing, not only about something that is material of a house. We also have to talk about resources that are to be destined to the lives of women. Another general aspect, and perhaps which is an inviting for reflection and self-criticism, is the need to add to our debates something that goes beyond how much a society loses when women don't have the same conditions as men do. It is necessary to enrich this debate, this discussion, to, for example, discuss how productive would it be for the country, for our countries, if we did not have violence towards women. We're losing percentages of development in the violence towards women. Perhaps we would be countries with greater education, with greater work capacity, with greater development, if we were countries that were free of violence towards women. And perhaps I'm interested in pointing out that I consider it important to highlight from this event that it would be necessary to recommend, for example, that our countries can generate information that is much clearer, that is much more detailed regarding data that is differentiated, that allow us to be able to bridge these gaps, particularly from the ministries of finance, from the ministries of finance. And another thing that has been left clear in the discussions that you have had is that the costing answer definitely to national plans. That is to say, they get incorporated into the national plans of each country. We have heard, or you have heard, costing experiences that are very interesting, that are very wealthy experiences, but it has to remain clear that there are no formulas to be able to confront. We have contexts that are differentiated. We have cultures which are different. There's the diversity of cultures, and that these policies need to be defined, they need to be discussed in accordance to the social, financial, and cultural context of each country. And by that same token, I would also like to point out the importance of the follow-up to the policies that are defined by the countries and part of the social organizations, specifically on behalf of women organizations, platforms and institutions, NGOs, social movements, women's social movements, which are precisely the ones that with their social activism, that with their political activism, really make a difference, that this is not an issue to be faced only through tools, technical tools, but rather it is a process, it's a political process, and that is where women have to, in some way, have an incidence, and in other ways have an incidence, in order to be able to materialize the public policies that are being discussed and that are already being defined in the different countries. Finally, I wanted to refer to my country, to Bolivia, regarding what is being done in Bolivia. the three categories for investment in order to aim the assigning of budgets for the redistribution of wealth with social equity and gender equity give us a clarity regarding our policies. To mention, and with this I would conclude, to highlight that the main thing, the fundamental thing, above and beyond all of the technical debates that can be had, is the political willingness that our authorities can have at the highest level. And in this regard, at least me, in my case, I am convinced that in Bolivia, that we have it very clear at the highest level. And a proof of that, a tangible proof of that, is the fact that the policy of our government is expressed in the fact that is expressed in our political constitution, that it seems like a verse in the specific gender, and our new legislations that have a tendency to protect women from violence and of all types of violence, but also violence of political violence, of political we have made great strides forward, but it's still in the paper. It's still in the dead letter. So now our challenge as a country is to be able to move forward in the facts and to make that constitution be viable, to make those legislation really take place and happen that are there to be able to overcome the problems that during the 3 days we have been discussing in this space. I want to thank all of you very much for your presence, and I do hope that we can continue, each one of us and each one of you, with your goals, with your objectives in your different countries. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful farewell. Thank you very much. And before for the countries, I would like to give the final words of a closing statement to Tania, who is the representative for UN Women in Bolivia. As you know, she's the coordinator of the program's gender-sensitive budgets. Tania, please. Well, in order to be able to close, I think that these 3 days have been very intense. I would like to thank the commitment that we have from the Ministry of Autonomies, the Ministry of Justice, and the support that we've had from the European delegation. I believe that without this support we would not have been able to do it. I'd also like to very much thank our coordination in the New York office, with whom we have also been working very closely, and to all of the coordinators for the program, for the financing, to increase gender equality on a worldwide level. I would also like to thank and mention that I don't think we have mentioned the work that has been carried and the support that have been provided by Rael Coelho and Carmen Saulaga in order to be able to make this seminar possible. They have assisted us in the whole methodological processes and to see how we thought about the issue, and they have been in charge of constructing this global mapping along with what has been the regional center of PNUD in Panama. I think it's also important to make viable the reports that each one of you, and I'm included, that have always been, and from different spaces where we have been found and where we will be found, where we'll be fighting for human rights and for women's rights, for young girls, and in general of our society. I would like to also thank our Master of Ceremonies, Sandra Mayo. I'd like to thank our colleagues that we have been working with, and back Marisol, who is responsible for communication of our office in Bolivia, who has collaborated with us a great deal so this event could also be dispersed to the colleagues that have been here, very aware of the whole issue of the computing system. All of the sessions that are recorded, put it forward in the web. We have been tweeting the whole event. We also have the support of the High Commission for that and the alliances that we have been strengthening. And this space is a reflection of the joint work that all of the people that have been here have put forth, and I would like to thank you all very much for your participation, and let's give ourselves a round of applause for the work that we have carried out in these 3 days. And before one brief one that I was forgetting, we're going to have a group photo, so please let's not disperse. If we can perhaps place ourselves around here so that perhaps we can also have this remembrance photo, and also to mention that all of the information of the event, all of the presentations of each session and the material of addressing each one of the issues are going to be in the website of the site. We have sent all this information. We're also going to continue doing it so that we can share all of the information, and it'll be the biographies, the curriculums that each one of you has provided us with, so that they can have the data, contact data, and be able to learn a great deal more in greater detail in that which we have done, and they're trying to put forward what can be seen in the web. We've had many visits from Honduras. They've been talking to us and tweeting us. We have been listening to us in other countries as well. Here in Bolivia, there's been a very good reception, and just that, and thank you very much.